Good morning to the vinyl community and to the crime community. I'm here on April 12th, 2025. Here's my favorite book. The chapter is called Conspirators in Conflict. I'm going to have to divide this into two chapters because it's a very long chapter. They cover people like Danny DiCarlo, the Tates, Terry Melcher, Candy Bergen, Colonel Tate, Colonel Folger, a lot of colonels, a lot of people. Conspirators in conflict. Further subterfuge clouded the robbery of the La Biancas the next night. One of the most impenetrable mysteries in a case honeycombed with them is the connection between the slaughters of Cielo and Waverly. One of the few things we can state with certainty about the second night of slaying was that the killers went even further in disguising their crime as some sort of revolutionary action, great embellishing on Beausoleil's lead to Hinman's. The shocking stage setting made such an impression that even now, few look beyond the sensational misdirection to the more mundane criminal motives behind the bloodshed. And early as August 10, 69, police sergeants Whitley and Gunther, Whitley and Guenther, alerted their superiors of the obvious similarities between Hinman's killing and the multiple murders at Cielo and Waverly. They even presented the clear connection between Beausoleil and his crime partners at Spawn Ranch. But even as the Cielo victims were delivered to the questionable skills of Los Angeles County Coroner Thomas Noguchi and his autopsy table, law enforcement already contributed to their own cover-up, to the murderer's cover-up. Word from the highest echelons prevented the lead from being pursued. Incompetence or intrigue? Perhaps both. Back in the late 80s, when I still gave Charlie the benefit of the doubt about the Hinman copycat plan, the original told me was the girl's goofy motive. I asked him why he thought this unmissable link wasn't made early on. He recalled that those in Spawn in the know about Hinman's murder, Atkins, Bruner, Davis, and DiCarlo, were surprised when they weren't rounded up immediately after Beausoleil's arrest. Charlie believed that one reason they weren't is because Hinman and Danny DiCarlo, who pressured Beausoleil to retrieve money from Hinman, were both informants working for the local Malibu narcotics squad. The authorities, Charlie strongly suspected, needed to cover their tracks first. As soon as word that Beausoleil was sent Gary Hinman floating into the cosmos, as Lynette Fromme poetically described in her memoir, the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club vroomed off of the Spawn Ranch en masse. They feared they'd be fingered since Bobby had gone to collect the bread from Hinman on their behalf. Danny DiCarlo, Charlie recalled, stayed on. After 1970, Charlie came to believe that DiCarlo remained a spy on the group for the cops. In private coded correspondence with the Satans, even after he was arrested, Charlie was informed by the bikers that after the Satans were dissolved for breaking the outlaw code, some were patched into the Hells Angels because of DiCarlo's cooperation with the police. Ratting was a cardinal sin for any criminal organization, especially a 1% MC. Donkey DiCarlo continued to stay at the ranch, billing his fob favorites Melcher's Rush, Ruth Ann Morehouse, otherwise known as Whoosh, and Susan Atkins, other K, aka Sadie, even if he pressured Charlie to cough up extortion money to make up for Beausoleil's failure to pay Satan's back for the grand they'd blown on bunk mescaline. If it seems odd that Charlie tolerated the commune continuing to fraternize with DiCarlo even as he was being threatened by him, I saw the same behavior from Charlie in prison for many years. He was so used to the dog-eat-dog betrayals and mutual exploitation of life behind bars, he'd be at least outwardly friendly with the prisoners who were extorting him. Charlie was so certain that the bikers described dealing that he once told me that in whacking suspected snitch Shorty Shea, the Spawn gang had struck the wrong pig. Always seeing the crimes in context of military history, he was quoting Adolf Hitler. Late in the day, regrets after purging his friend Ernst Röhm instead of traitor Heinrich Himmler, who secretly negotiated with the Allies. Charlie emphasized again in 2013 that he'd come to believe that DiCarlo, who he said actively encouraged Shea's demise, was the most problematic of the several unknown police informants at the ranch. This is another little understood reason for much of the cover-up. Spawn's ranch was much of the secrecy about what happened. This is due to law enforcement's secret arms covering in tracks. Fast forward to October '69, Bobby Beausoleil's 17-year-old girlfriend, Kitty Lutzinger, broke the case to the Inyo County Police when she implicated Susan Atkins in the Hinman slayings. In relaying this confused details of what she learned from the motor-mouth Atkins, Kitty inadvertently also revealed to the cops that Sexy Sadie and the commune must have had something to do with the killings of Wojciech Frykowski when she described a detail about the crime unknown to the public at the time. Atkins described a stabbing that clearly matched Frykowski's wounds, not Hinman's. Another puzzle to ponder, despite the Manson's commune's somewhat violent rhetoric about death to snitches, Lutzinger, the weak link in the chain, who squealed to the cops and sent her former comrades to prison, was welcomed back into communal life with open arms. During the trial of Charlie and the girls, Lutzinger even sat with the other Slippies on the sidewalk, outwardly expressing just as much pious devotion to Charlie as her Spawn sisters did. The conspicuous lack of retribution visited upon those responsible for Charlie's arrest by this supposedly bloodthirsty cult is one more enigma few have addressed. Further lawyers of deception entered the picture when on the very same day Kitty Lutzinger sang her song to homicide detectives. Straight Satan Al Springer sprung into action to lead off as to pass and to exert damage control. The biker volunteered to talk to the cops with his own story of the Hinman crime, albeit one clearly designed to convince law enforcement that Danny DiCarlo and the Straight Satans were not involved. Simultaneously, he pinned the blame squarely on Charlie, who I don't believe Springer ever even met. Manson said as to much during one of our court proceedings. Springer even admits during the selective snitching that his main concern to this counter, whatever Kitty had squealed, because I don't want to see Danny get in trouble for something he didn't do. In the process of this interview, the true nature of the Straight Satan's responsibility for the Hinman's murders was hidden. Springer's selective squealing, quite uncharacteristic of any outlaw biker, initiated Danny DiCarlo's cooperation with the prosecution that was key to blanking the series of murders exclusively on Manson. The important but neglected fragment was far more crucial in creating the official narrative of Manson, the main mastermind, than many realize. One of the most bizarre claims Springer made in this important interview is that Spawn Ranch stuntman Shorty Shea, slain by Tex Watson and others on August 26, '69, was originally supposed to be part of the Cielo Drive crew. This extremely unlikely allegation is probably as fanciful as the rest of Springer's obviously agenda-driven testimony, but it's worth noting that the only bit of circumstantial evidence supporting the often expressed theory that one reason for Shea's slaying was to prevent him from talking about some prior knowledge of the Cielo Waverly Drive murders. Many Manson phobes continue to praise Bugliosi despite the avalanche of damaging evidence about him that the general public has only learned since his death. The diehards often argue that even as the district attorney went about it in an unethical and untruthful way, at least he succeeded through his morally questionable methods in returning the monster Charlie Manson to prison. However, these same advocates of ends justify the means, justice failed to understand that in the prosecution's single-minded obsession with sending Manson to the gas chamber, they were more willing to grant freedom and immunity from prosecution to the other guilty as sin criminals with blood on their own hands. Like Pelosi's star witness, Linda Kasabian, who bears a great deal of responsibility for the Tate LaBianca slaughter, DiCarlo also got away with murder, enjoying decades of freedom despite his instigating the harem killings, and according to Manson, reaped direct financial advantage from the LaBianca robbery. On the same weekend of August 10th, when homicide detectives were implicating and avoiding connections to Hinman, Tate, and LaBianca murders, other less legal but perhaps more mighty powers that beheld their own powwow, as we will examine in detail, mob consigliere supreme Sidney Korshak was called to the Paramount Studios chief, Robert Evans, to help Polanski and his associates bury the truth about Wojciech Wachowski and Jay Sebring's drug dealing operation at Cielo Drive, among many other uncomfortable facts best not made available to public consumption. Even as they met, newspapers and magazines around the world already honed in on Wachowski's ill-conceived attempt to corner the local market on the MDA business as the likely trigger of what appeared to be a crime of retribution. It took a few months to staunch the flow of accurate reporting and flood the news with lies. Korshak's damage control and leak plugging were so effective that we still only know the most superficial layer, what he erased. Conspiracy fantasists unacquainted with human nature imagine that the rich and powerful plot to hide their misdeeds and they work in perfect seamless accord with each other. It doesn't work like that in the real world. There was no team effort. Little solidarity coordinated the various provocateurs. Every man for himself act of depression focused on the often conflicting vested interests in each individual player. The musicians, actors, entertainment industry executives, frantically working to suppress the hidden truths of their incriminating involvement with the killers and the victims, were often hostile to each other as only paranoid egomatics can be. We're just going to end it right here. This is farther than I wanted to go. Because next, we're going to be talking about Steve McQueen and his whole involvement with all the pornography and Evil Younger and Bugliosi's cover-up and on and on and on. There's a lot to go through with the Tates and all the other players and all their lies that Melcher covered up. This is sad. This will take a long time to read, but it's worth my time. So after we get through the conflict of conspirators, we'll get to the Tex Watson murders. In the meantime, I say peace to the vinyl community, to all the members of the families, which would including probably some of my family members that I can't even talk about. My best friend lost his mother and father, and he doesn't know what happened to him either. So I'm going to pray for peace for all these families. We pray for peace for all the children.